Hello everyone, this is Ashlyn, also known as SlideEV3, and I want to make a quick video to talk about my file list that I took to 3 RTNs over the course of Road to National seasons. I placed 5th at 2 of them, and I placed a middle of the pack at the third one with 3 wins, 3 losses. And I'll go into the individual wins and losses after I give you the general rundown of what the deck is trying to do. And to start things off, we got to talk about Dragon Scalar Flight Path. People were considering Snappies versus Dragon Scalar. Snappies can brick a hand, which is very unbrick a hand, which is very useful. But Dragon Scalar has the added benefit of getting the one block and still having stuff like Compounding Anger that costs more than 2 as a way to double finishers. But what I saw was you can swing Emberblade twice with this thing. And with a Tunic resource and having Emberblade on the third or higher chain link, you're able to actually get 3 value plus the 1 value from blocking on your legs, which is quite nice. Pair that with your Mask the Pouncing Links, you have 2 instances of one-time effects, and you're usually tutoring in this list specifically for about 7 value. 7 value coupled with the 4 value you get from Dragon Scalar Flight Path is usually enough to race down any aggro mirror and also push oppressive damage against decks that like to play defensive. And we have tools to get around those defensive decks. The thesis of the deck kind of centers around Dragon Scalar, but I'll get to that in a moment. As you'll notice, if we look into my stats, I only have I have 11 one cost, but the ones that I want to play that aren't blue are 6. I have 3 Mounting Angers, and I have 3 Spreading Flames, which are the most above rate cards that I personally like to run in the file list. And coupled with that, I have 14 blues. So I'm able to usually play these in the event that I do. And I also have Ignite to cover for them. I have Tunic Resource in a lot of the matchups. And so what ends up happening is I can pay for pretty much every Mounting Anger and Spreading Flames without it bricking my hand, which is lovely, as I'm able to fully play out and get max value and not have a chance to brick. So I run a very consistent cost curve. I run 14 blues with 6 one costs. So oftentimes, cost really isn't an issue, especially if I'm running Tunic. And then when it comes to the attacks, I run a lot of Draconic starters. I run Brands, I run Ignite, I run Mounting, I run Oath, I run Rising Resentment, I run Ronin Renegade. Even in the blues, I have a brand with Cinderclaw. And so I have a lot of easy ways to give Draconic go again. And so the question you might be asking is, what about the turns where I don't draw these? What about the turns where I get Ignite with no cost reducer? Well, that's where Dragon Scalar comes in. The whole thesis of the deck is you run a really consistent low cost curve that can sometimes give you more resources than you want, and when it does do that, you pay an extra resource. You pay into swinging Emberblade twice, which is either by saying, I swing in with Ronin, I play Ignite, I pitch a blue, I swing Emberblade twice because it makes it cost 1, and then I can pop Dragon Scalar for free because it's the third chain link, and then I can swing Emberblade again to get a lot of value. So I'm able to offset the lack of high roll potential of the deck because of how consistent it is with the fact that I have something on board to always say, if you have a little too much resources, this can eat it and convert that into direct value, which is amazing. And from that point, the deck kind of worked its way out from there. So I'm going to talk about pretty much most of the cards here, but I'll start with the equipment. Dragon Scale, I give the explanation. Tunic is really good in matchups where the you don't really need the block from Flame Scale, you need the extra resource. So Tunic is always good for that. It's also really good with Ignite. A really cool combo you can do is you can play Ignite, crack Tunic, and then swing Ember Blade for basically free by using the Tunic resource, which is a 1 card 5 play that's 2 Draconic Chain Links, and you can get so much value out of it. It's a really good card, and one of the innovations in my brain and what kind of the deck can go from here has been considering running more matchups with Tunic just because of how good that extra resource is. We're running Pouncing Links. Pouncing Links is an amazing card. We run 3 Lava Bursts and we run 2 finishers, whether it's Salt the Wound or Tenacity. And so we almost always will have a target for this. And because we run Spreading Flames and Rake over the Coals, which I'll talk about in a minute, Oftentimes Lava Burst, when we tutor it, is worth around 7-ish value, which is better than a normal file list, especially one that doesn't really run these two cards as frequently. So you get a lot of value out of Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. We don't run Momentum, even in the sideboard, because even in matchups where you would theoretically want it, our deck doesn't really swing for many 1-for-4s. So we have a hard time triggering it, especially if they have one of equipment block. So oftentimes I'm not able to convert a maximum momentum value too high. We're running Emberblade for the same reason I'm talking about Dragon Scaler. Swinging it twice is really overvalued, and it can help you run the conservative cost curve. Plus, every single blue you draw is converted into 3 value automatically. So you're in a really good position. Tiger Stripe Shuko is great because it's just going to buff something by 1. You get it a lot of the time. You have Ignite to get it, so Ignite and Phoenix Flame trigger Shuko. You have Phoenix Flame plus Lava Burst. You have Dragon Power, which I'll get into in a little bit. You have Salt the Wound. You have a lot of options to trigger Shuko, and plus it blocks too. You make really good use of this card as 5. I'm going to get into the sideboard equipment real quick. Tide Flippers, obviously for arcane matchups. Um, Even though racing is good in a lot of matchups, I would still say for your Florians, your Verdances, other stuff, you still want to run the Arcane Barrier 1. And because we're not using Dragon Scaler, it's still completely fine because we still have a very conservative cost curve. So we're oftentimes getting enough value over the course of the game or consistency in terms of value to still pressure heroes enough. This list is kind of centered around the idea is what is the minimum amount of damage value I need to present in order to kill my opponent. So against aggro mirrors, you run stuff like Rake Over the Coals, and you run stuff like Fire Tenant. So you go above rate with a lot of things, and it's usually enough damage to kill the aggro mirrors. And then if you have to use Tide Flippers, now you're working with a deck that's really conservative, and so it gives you that consistent damage that's a little less than the aggro mirrors, but still enough to really put the pressure on something like a Kano or a Verdance or a Florian. So Flame Scale is great because, like I said, we don't really need Tunic to make this deck work. Tunic is great for double swinging with Emberblade, but we have Ignite for that as well if it comes to that. And because we're running such a conservative cost curve, we aren't as concerned with the idea of uh, oh, we draw 2 reds or 2 1 costs, and that's really scary because oftentimes it's not going to come to that. It's very rare that you draw 2 1 costs in this deck, and if you do, you either are on Tunic, have an Ignite, or you can Arsenal pass, and it probably won't happen for the next couple of games. And then Spellfray is just Kano. This slot could honestly be changed for a lot of other things. I think the sideboard is really where I want to make a lot of changes, but I digress. Let's get in the main 60. So we have Blaze Headlong. I don't need to talk about this card. It's just really good. 0 for 4 go again. Pushes breakpoints, allows you to get mass triggers, mass pouncing licks, allows you to trigger that easier. It's really good. Brand is kind of a 0 for 3 starter. It pairs very nicely with first tenant, fire tenant strike first because this is not inherently draconic. So I can do this into fire tenant and then another 0 for 3 into Phoenix Flame. So I'm not too concerned about stuff. It's also great if I want to tutor Salt the Wound on an Oath of Loyalty turn and I need to brand that. That happened in a game today, and I'll go more into that once I talk about kind of how my games went. Compounding Anger 2 of, this is kind of where a lot of contention will sometimes lie. It's a 0 for 5. That's really good. A 1 card 5 is above rate for anyone's standards. It's a great card. The only problem is that it's only ever going to be 5. It's very rare that you can produce 5 chain links before this and then be able to play this with a Spreading Flames. It also doesn't trigger Shuko, so it's going to be worse than Lava Burst in that respect. But overall, it's just a really good card. 0 for 5, block 3. I can't complain. I run 2 of it because the third is a little too much for me, and then I sometimes brick with 2 in my hand, or I brick with 2 finishers. Important to note is that Dragon Scaler Flight Path, we want to swing Emberblade twice with this in most matchups. And the only time we want a double finisher is if we have to. If we're forced to by our hands, for example, they have disruptive effects on their turn and we want to swing both finishers because we know there's a good chance that we won't be able to keep the other one. And so that's the time where you usually want to double finisher, and you can do this with Compounding Anger, so you can Compounding Anger Salt the Wound, Compounding Anger Lava Burst, whatever may have you. But Compounding Anger is really good. Display Loyalty is our only fealty generation in the deck, and it is very here. It's here for very simple, two simple reasons. Oath of Loyalty, getting around that, so I can make Salt the Moon Draconic, or on a Spreading Flames turn, I can make something Draconic that otherwise isn't, in order to make it work. I can make Fire Tenant non-Draconic, but you don't really need the fealties for the deck to operate. It mostly covers weird situations where you get they don't really they convert to value, usually. They'll convert to some kind of value. But the value is mostly in saving bricked hands from this card, and this card, and also converting into a lot of value on Dragon Power. This is really good in the late game when you have a lot of blues in your deck, where you can basically make a blue deal 6 damage with this plus Shuko and plus a display loyalty trigger. So even in matchups like new, I tend to like to sub out some of my red block threes in order to because I really value the fealty in the late game, so I can swing for big damage when they have cheese in their hand. Fire Tenant Strike first, 0 for 4, great. Only problem is it's not inherently Draconic, so it is not really a Draconic starter. It does fulfill the red card played, so you can play this into Blaze Headlong, but make sure you play this when you're not doing your floating flame firms and don't get confused. It looks draconic, it's not, trust me, but 0 for 4, and if you can make it work, it works really well. And you can also put that extra 1 on any card you want. So if you want to make a mounting come in for 5, if you want to make something else come in for 4, if you want to make Ignite come in for 3, which I don't know which way you want to do that, but that's okay. Hot on their heels, and Lava Vein Loyalty, I'm going to talk on the same breath. These are 6 of the same copy of the card. We don't care about marking in this deck. I just really value the idea of 3 on offense, 3 on defense, which helps out really much against assassin matchups. So I like running this. When I do cut one of them, I cut this one, because sometimes you can mind control your opponent to make them overthink how marking works, because people don't play against Fi. I played in 3 RTNs, and I was the only Fi at each RTN. So a lot of people are inexperienced, and this can sometimes force blocks when people don't really know how your hero works. Ignite. Oh my gosh, this card is nuts. When I tell you this card is the glue that keeps this deck together, it is. It's so incredibly good. It's what enables you to run Dragon Scalar Flight Path and swing with Emberblade twice. It triggers Shuko on turns where you're running Compounding Anger or you don't have a finisher because we're not running as many in this list. This card is absolutely nuts. You can use it with Tunic to swing in an Emberblade for a free 5 value. The value on this is insane. And I can go into a video talking about every single Ignite interaction, and that would take me like 30 minutes. So I'm going to save you guys here. But if you want to know more about Ignite, please let me know in the comments, and I'll go through all the interactions with Fi. I'll go through a lot of more in-depth with the deck and certain combos and all this stuff, because although it seems very simple on the surface, this deck has some weird play lines, and sequencing is really important, and it's not as clear as people think all the time. Moving on. Lava Burst, I shouldn't have to explain this. 0 for 5, like Compounding Anger, but it triggers Shuko, and it's really paired well up with Spreading Flames, which is your primary pop-off card in this deck. This plus the Spreading Flames is just 1 card 7. That is too much value to ignore in your list. This is what allows Fi to be overrate, is his finisher in Lava Burst. It's really good. And as you notice, I only have 7 finishers in the list, and I only have any 7 finishers at a time, and that's because if we can run more finishers if we had Snapdragons exclusively for double finishers and fixing hands. But we are running Dragon Scalar, and so we want to use it on the double Emberblade turns. So oftentimes you want to have less finishers because drawing double finishers is a lot worse for you in this deck than it is in a normal Fi list. And so we're able to trim it down to just the finishers I want. Lava Vein Loyalty, I already talked about with Hard on their heels. Mount Inger, solid 1 for 4 go again. Importantly to note for all the cool 5 people here, if you swing with this on the 3rd or higher chain link, what you can do on hit, even if you have no cards in your hand, you can let the hit resolve and you can say in resolution, activate Fi. So, or you can say in resolution or in response to the mounting anger trigger. I say in response to the mounting anger trigger. So you can respond to the mount anger trigger with Fi ability to grab a Phoenix Flame in your hand after the hit. Because oftentimes you run into an issue where they might not block it, and then you grab the Phoenix Flame early and they say, oh, you can banish something, and then they de-react. This would come up with something like Rowdy Locals, which I no longer run in the list, but it's also a really good option on this hero. Just remember you can do really sneaky stuff with this card. It's a 1 for 4 go again. It's another Draconic starter. That's what we need. Oath of Loyalty. Now this card, I love it, but it sells you out sometimes. There are some turns where it really messes you up. Um, like for example, if you Arsenal Assault the Wound and you draw this, it's pure brick. Especially if you're playing Salt the Wound in certain matchups, you need to play that card. If it sticks in your arsenal, you're gonna lose. So Oath of Loyalty causes some brick potential, and that's why we have our 0 for 3 Gogans with Display Loyalty. Sorry about that. Um, and hopefully you're able to make it work. But sometimes it does brick. I've been thinking about going down to 2 on this, but it's all up to you. But this is what I ran for all 3 of my RTNs. We run the run of Phoenix Flame. This card's really good. If you've played anything about Fi, you know how good this card is. Remember in endgame scenarios that you can ignite to and pitch a Phoenix Flame to swing Ember Blade, so you can convert 1 value into 3 if that 2 value will matter to kill someone. Always remember that with Ignite, you can 0 for 3 Ignite, get the Phoenix Flame from back. Ignite also works on your hero ability, by the way, which people don't know about. But Phoenix Flame, it ties the deck together. It's super good. If you played any 5, you know what this card does. This card is showing up in a lot of Fi lists nowadays, but it did not show up for a while, and I was playing on it really, really early. I played it on like 2 weeks ago. Even before then, I was running and testing with it. This card is good. So good, in fact, I would consider it like the second, well, maybe even the best card in your deck. This card, people say, mini Art of War, which it kind of is, but the reality is with Rake Over the Coals, in aggro mirrors, with Phoenix Flame plus Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, that's already 2 extra value from this, plus whatever you have in your hand. And if you have a Jar of Raker Calls and you arsenal it, and you get a non-brick hand, which this deck is really good at not bricking. I rarely brick on this deck because of the way it's designed with the cost curve, with the 1 costs, and having so many Draconic starters. It's very rare that this deck bricks. So when you run something like Rake Over the Coals, you arsenal it, it's a pretty safe bet. You have a hand that can convert this 1 card to 6 value. And I'm going to be so real here. 1 card 6 value is too good of a rate for people to usually beat. I had a game today where I was versing a man by the name of Fat Fab Jesus on Syndra. I went second. He did 9 damage to me turn 0. I I couldn't block with this because of the first card in my hand. I was going second. I dropped my hand. It's an absolute brick. It's Spreading Flames. It's Compounding. I think it's Spreading Flames. Rake Over the Coals. Um, Fire Tenant and Lava Vein. And so I go Fire Tenant into Lava Vein Loyalty for 2 card 7. And then I just arsenal the Rake Over the Coals and pass. And I drew up a heater hand, and I did upwards of 30 damage, 6 value per card in that hand, with Spreading Flames plus Rake Over the Coals plus the finisher with Lava. I actually tutored a Salt the Wound, which I made Draconic with a second Brand with Cynical on my hand. And I was able to do about 30 or so damage, and I won the game despite taking 9 damage on turn 0 and IP penaltying myself. With a little help of some bricks from my opponent, but that's how good this card is. You can be really down, and it is a comeback tool. If you draw it, I'm almost always happy, except if I draw 2 of them together, that's really bad. And that's the only reason we're not running 3, because when they're drawn together, they're really, really freaking bad. Rising Resentment is great, 0 for 3 starter. Can sometimes interact where you banish and reduce a cost, but usually it doesn't come to that because you're not really desperate enough to reduce the cost anyways. Can sometimes convert into an early Phoenix Flame. Like you have an extra resource to play Phoenix Flame on an earlier chain link so that you can buff it up with Spreading Flames on an early chain link and then play a higher base card later in the chain link. Ronin Renegade, I'm not going to explain this. Draconic 0 for 3 starter. You want it. Spreading Flames is the meat and potatoes of this deck. Spreading Flames is really good. It's a 1 cost 3. Fits in your cost curve, so you can swing with this and an Ember Blade. And you're 2 card 6. But if you get, the more chain links you get past the 3rd, usually, because a lot of 0-3s in the deck, you're just getting incrementally more and more value. So comboing this with your Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, or you running Tunic and you swing with Ignite, and then you make Ember Blade free. Or actually, no, that wouldn't really work too well because you're already pitching for that. But you get the general gist of what I'm trying to say, where the more chain links, the better with this card. And in aggro mirrors, you're doing numbers with this. If you draw this in an aggro mirror, you're in a great spot, especially if you draw it with Rake over the Coals. Sequencing is really important in this card, and I would go into a lot of the interactions, but I don't want to make the video longer than it already is. I am kind of rambling a bunch, but if you guys would like to see me talk specifically about sequencing, all the cards, all this stuff, please let me know in the comments. Salt the Wound, great in the aggro mirror. That's where it shines. There's going to be some turns where you don't draw Spinning Flames, and you think about it, and your opponent is consistently saying no blocks, like a Syndra, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to tutor Salt the Wound and swing it in for like 8 value. It's going to be great. It also doesn't use Lava Burst up. There's a ton of situations where Salt the Wound's the better pickup than Lava Burst, and there are some times where it's worse, and in those cases you don't tutor. And plus, because we're running a conservative cost, the bonus is there's a lot of hands where we don't have a one cost. So this converts to an Ember Blade, and usually you're not breaking because you don't usually need that one extra resource. Blocks 3, Salt the Wound, Trigger Shoot Go, it's great. Now we're getting into our blue count. Bring a Cinder Claw blue, 0 for 1 go again. We don't really care about the Draconic effect. It's sometimes relevant, but we just prefer this over the 0 for 1 blue starters. We prefer this over Rising and Ronin Renegade, so we run it. It's really good in the late game when you have your blues left and you just need a Draconic starter. It's also really chill because oftentimes when you need this card, when you need to not brick, and you draw this card, it does the job perfectly. Because usually when you need to not break, you got your opponent on the back ropes at like 1 or 2. And one where they're at 1 or 2 is really fucking bad. They have forced to block it. So it acts like a 0 for 3 and is a starter. So it's really important. Cinderskin Devotion, a block 3. We love it. Love this card. Comes in for 2 value, triggers shoot go, so it's sometimes 3 value on offense. It's a 1 cost. We can usually pay for it because we don't have as many 1 costs. You get the gist. Dragon Power, crazy card. I don't know how the fuck they printed this. You pay 1, a blue that swings. Excuse me, a blue that swings in for 6 is nuts. Who made this card? Who made this card? It's crazy. If you have a fealty, this is so good. I've won so many games where I've drawn a Dragon Power with another blue, and I'm able to convert it basically to act as a Lava Burst because, I'm usually not bricking with a 1 cost because I either have Tunic, I have Ignite, I'm not drawing my Mounting Ears or Spreading Flames anymore. It's good at closing out games. It's good when you need an extra finisher. It's good when you draw it with another blue and you have a fealty. This card is nuts. Play it. Lava Vein Loyalty, blue block 3 swings for 1. Don't really need to explain much. Just solid. Does what I needed to do whenever I needed to do it. Prowess is a new addition. It is the main thing that changed throughout the RTN season. I went pretty up on it. It's pretty good. It's great into Guardian matchups where you need to have an offensive overlap in order to actually punch through and deal damage because they're just going to block and try to fatigue you and outlast you, which they have an easier time doing compared to other decks. This is really good into aggro mirrors. This is great when you're turn 0. And because if you look at the cards in the deck, usually these blues are very playable in any given hand, especially Dragon Power with Display Loyalty. So oftentimes if you draw 2 blues, it's usually and you get a Prowess Agility, it's Prowess Agility in one of these blues. It's this so you're able to, if you need to swing, you can swing with one of these. And if you don't, you can pitch this blue and throw a Prowess of Agility at the end of the chain link. And if you know a pretty certain that you're going to get the 4 chain link next turn, it's a great card because you get the 4th chain link, you bank it, you draw a card. It's great. That's the main 60. This 60 right here that I have designed is meant to play into aggro mirrors. This is for your Syndras. This is for your Viscerize. Rip, he's probably going to LO. This is for your Auroras. This is for any deck that's trying to race you. For my money, Fi has a really good win rate into aggro mirrors with this deck list. And it's not because he's providing on hits. It's just because you produced above rate stuff way more consistently than your opponent. And it's just, I don't know what much. It's weird because it doesn't look like that on paper. 0 for 3, 0 for 3. A lot of 0 for 3s. But with Rake combined with Spreading Flames combined with Ignite, you're oftentimes just pushing your opponent to a low enough light where disruption doesn't really matter. And in Acro Mirrors, you can run Dragon Scaler plus Flame Scale to block an important on hit, maybe a CNC. And I'll have you know, we have a lot of three blocks. Three block, 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 three block. We have so many three blocks in this deck, and you're so willing to just put this this plus this out there for a CNC. It's a great position to be in. Let's get into the sideboard. Keep it simple. Flame Call Awakening Phoenix Flame is here for Mystic Heroes to deal with Passover. I had a game. It was very sad. It was a game I played at Game On. I think it was Game On down in Fayetteville. And I played against my new opponent. In turn 0, I activated 5. He in response Passovered. And I said, fuck, it's fine. You know, we can tutor another with Flame Call Awakening. And then he proceeds to hit the first 2 banishes. He hits a Loyalty Beyond the Grave, and for his second banish that he hits with the second attack action card he hits me is the other Loyalty Beyond the Grave. And I had 1 left in deck, and now that's a useless card. So sometimes you get high rolled by Mystic Heroes, but oftentimes, if you have 2 Flame Call and a Phoenix Flame, you can usually get the Phoenix Flame out before the Passover. So you deal with Zen and Enigma that way pretty easily. And then new, she has to do the Sacred Art 1 of. So it's pretty hard for them to get rid of all your Phoenix Flames. So you run Flame Call just as a way to deal with it. I usually like to set out 1 Spreading Flames, 1 Mounting Anger, just to keep a consistent cost curve, especially when I'm running Flame Call. But I could see an argument for taking out 1 of Mounting Anger and 1 of something else. So you go up to 7, which is a little bit more risky, but you conserve the 3 Spreading Flames so you can have as much pop-off turns as you can. Loyalty Beyond the Grave. This card is cracked. It is so good. You run it into slow matchups where you can consistently get 2 of these out there. And it's great because oftentimes it allows you to get more cards in your hand on your pop-off turns so that you can get Spreading Flames effect, you can get Rake over the Coals effect. You're usually not running this plus Rake, but you're getting Spreading Flames effect. And it allows you to punch through these really defensive decks. So if you're going against New, Victor, Guardian, sort of Assassin, any of this deck, this is really good because you can say to your opponent, I'm going to block, I'm going to get these in my graveyard. And then the moment you don't disrupt me on a turn, I pop this, I got a 6-card hand. Oh wait, it's a 7-card hand with Master of the Pouncing Links. Oh wait, it's another one because of Prowess of Agility. That's a little too much, but you get the gist of it. You really have this kind of, I need a card in my hand now, and I really want to push damage, or it can fix a bad hand. I've had games where I played against a new, and I've said no blocks, and I said fuck it, take a card from my hand, they take the 1 blue, and I pop Loyalty, and I grab a blue, and it fixes my hand, and I win the game off it. It's a nuts card, you should definitely run it. The 1 of Shelter is because I don't have 2 others, but there's another reason for it. Shelter's just a really good 0 for 4 D-React. I'd rather play it over Fate Foreseen. It's really good into Syndra. It's really good in Arachne. It's really good in a lot of heroes. So I run this over Fate just because I pulled it from a pack. But you can run Fate in here in the slot. I run 3 Sync Belows. This card was theoretically bad in Fi a while back with Art of War and a lot of draw effects. So drawing this would be really bad. Excuse me. But now when your draw effects are Loyalty and Prowess, you're not usually drawing more than 2 cards a turn. You're not usually drawing more than 1 card a turn. So if you draw this, you can always tuck in an Arsenal, and then oftentimes you're in a good spot. This fixes your hands. You can put in an Arsenal. Really good against Azalea. Great against fucking. I'm trying to think. Great against Assassin. Great against a lot of things. And then I'm talking about the Assassin. You sub this in, either you sub 1 in and take 1 salt out in matchups where you can't really tell whether they're going to block or they're not going to block. In this, you pull it into Guardian Assassins. It's really good in the late game. Doesn't require on hits, so you can pitch it early or bottom it early, and then you get it late game and it swings in for 6 value, and that's a lot of the times enough to take out some people. And so that's the general idea behind the list. That's the 60 I ran with. This is 15 in sideboard. As for how my matches went, my memory is going to be a little fuzzy, but at the gathering place, I overall went 4-1. I lost my round 1 to Aaron Grace on Syndra. I didn't roll. I didn't hit the high roll. I unfortunately went first, and oftentimes going first is pretty bad for those matchups. If you go second, it's a pretty surefire way you win. First, it gets a little dicey. I lose that 1 HP. It's fine. I played Taylor Crawford on Arachne Marionette. I win that game. I play a new in Drew. I win that game, and then I win another Arachne game. So 3 Assassin wins in a row. This deck is great against Assassin. It's so good. Uh, there's so many 3 blocks in your deck, and because you're really consistent, it's kind of hard for them to disrupt you too much, especially since you run a lot of Draconic starters. Oftentimes they'll look at your hand and just be like, I'm not like fully disrupting your hand. I'm just getting this much value. And so for new matchups, right, that is amazing because when you're playing as against new, they don't actually do a lot of damage unless just a Nick comes into play. They're mainly about the disruption. So if you're able to weather the storm and outvalue them, you can usually deal enough damage to really take them out. Especially with something like Loyalty Beyond the Grave, where you can block with those and then prepare for a big pop-off turn and then push a ton of damage on the turn they don't disrupt you. Arachne Marionette's a little bit weirder because of he does a little more damage with Kiss of Death and stuff like that. But overall, that went well. I played a Kano. I beat the Kano. We had a fun little showing where he uh, Aether Spindle for 10 and said, if I don't get an Aether Wildfire, you win, and if I do, you lose. And so he slow rolled it like the gentleman he was, and I got lucky enough. It was definitely scary. It was like a pure coin flip at that point. Again, top 8, I face a Jarl. It did not go too well. It was on Earth Jarl. Earth Jarl is quite hard for this list because it just does so much damage that it forces you to start blocking and spending your cards a lot earlier, even if it's not doing disruptive ice things. Um, so Earth Jarl is something to look out for, but it's the less popular choice. I lose there. I get top 8 out of, I think, 26 or so at the Gathering Place. It was a great time. The people in there were very nice. Next day, I go down to Game On. I overall went 4-2. I beat a Syndra, an Azalea, or I beat an Azalea. Then I beat a Syndra. Then I beat. I'm trying to remember the rest of it. I should have probably written this down. But I lose to an Azalea, different from the one I beat. I lose to a new, which I talked about earlier with the Passover. And then I beat everyone else. So I beat a Viserai, I beat a Syndra, I beat an Azalea, and I beat a Jarl. I did beat a Jarl. And Ice Jarl is actually very doable for this deck list because you have a lot of blues, and if you draw your pop-off cards, it's kind of hard for him to deal with it because he doesn't really want to block all the things you're doing. He's not like Victor where he clashes, draws a card, able to block forever and not give a crap. Jarl like doesn't want to fully block everything you do, which allows you to leak enough damage to usually kill him or run him out of threats. Because if you can get rid of his shield and his headpiece if he's running the frostbite, and you can keep track of his blizzards, you're usually in a really good spot versus him where he can't really disrupt you and you're pretty good against him. And then in the top 8, I lost to Fang in Zach. I don't know his last name. His Fang list was nuts. I don't know if he did a deck tech on it or anything. It's floating around somewhere. It's just a really solid value list, and we got outvalued by a value Fang list. I can't be too mad. And then in the matches I played today, I went overall 3-3. I won twice against my first round. I lost against Victor. It was quite close though, despite that, and I did not draw single spreading flames the entire until the very end. So if I had that, it could have been a different story, but it's whatever. I lose the first round. I then fight 2 Syndras at some point, but I think my round 2 might have been something else. It was a long day of gaming, so it's kind of hard for me to fully remember who I played and what was going on. Oh, I played a Viserai. So I played a Viserai into 2 Syndras, which I won those 3. So I was 3-1. And then I lost versus a Florian because I forgot to bring my Tide Flippers, and he decomposed in like turn 3, which that's matchup's really hard to win if they high roll like that. But they often don't, so it's usually a win. And then I played against a Syndra, and that game was a fun game. But it was like we were both out, so he like missed a mass trigger, and I'm like, I don't care, just draw the card. It was a very chill final game. So I don't put too much stake in it. But overall, two top eights. Of course, the three RTNs. This is my first RTN season, which means that a better player could probably do better with my list. But overall, this list performed very well. It rarely bricked. It did what I needed to do in every matchup, which had this level of consistency that just was crazy. It was, I would drop a hand, and 95% of my hands would not be bricks. They would be perfectly playable hands that do good damage and do exactly what I need to when I need to do. It also had good block potential. And so if you want a deck that is very consistent, that you can just jam at your locals, and is quite fun to play and is just about doing big number, but also doing small number when you need to. You should definitely give my list a try. I have Battlehard and Charlotte coming up. I don't know if I'm going to run with the same list. It's going to be in 2 weeks. Or if I'm going to try to add something like Art of the Dragon Blood or a bunch of these cards I'm thinking about maybe trying out in future games. But overall, it was really fun to play this list, really fun to build it, and I hope you learned something new about Fi, and or a new way to play him, or maybe it inspired you to go pick him up. Feel free to use this list. Uh, I don't know if I have the link. I think it might be link only, but if you want to see this at any time, just DM me a Discord. I'm Slatty underscore V3 on there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. Bye bye.